Put one hand on the center of your chest, not to pray, not to check if you are alive, just to feel the smallest evidence that energy is already moving through you before you ask what happens when it stops being arranged as you. Let your palm rest there for 60 seconds. Do not press hard. Do not force your breathing. Let the ribs lift your hand slightly, then let them lower it. Feel the warmth under your skin. Feel the faint vibration that is not one thing, but many things stacked together. Heartbeat, blood flow, muscle tone, breath, tiny movements too small to name. Now notice something strange. You are not feeling a solid object. You are feeling a temporary organization. Heat is leaving you every second. Oxygen is entering you. Carbon dioxide is leaving you. Blood is carrying chemical energy through tunnels you never see. Your cells are breaking molecules apart and rebuilding them before you have time to form a thought. You call this stillness. Physics calls it exchange. For 60 seconds, your hand is touching the border between the person you feel yourself to be and the universe that is constantly passing through that person. And that is where this question begins. Because when people ask why your energy does not disappear when you die, they usually imagine something soft, comforting, almost mystical. They imagine a hidden flame escaping. They imagine a glowing essence leaving the room. They imagine energy as if it were a private possession inside the body, something with your name written on it. But Stephen Hawking spent his life looking at a colder version of the same question. What happens to energy at a boundary? What happens when matter falls beyond a line we thought nothing could cross? What happens when the universe seems to hide something so completely that even light cannot return? Hawking did not answer by saying the universe is sentimental. He answered by saying the universe keeps accounts. And if even a black hole is not allowed to simply erase energy without consequence, then your body, warm and fragile and ordinary, was never an exception to physics. The mystery is not whether your energy disappears. The mystery is why you ever felt separate from the exchange. Keep your hand there a little longer. The warmth under your palm is not a metaphor. It is chemistry losing order. It is food becoming motion. It is sunlight stored in plants, stored in animals, stored in molecules, now released as heat, pressure, electrical gradients, and thought. You are not holding a soul detector, you are holding a thermodynamic event, and it is happening before death, not after it. That is the uncomfortable part. The same law that says your energy cannot disappear also says your present form cannot be frozen in place. Energy is conserved, but arrangements are not. Heat spreads, molecules move, patterns require maintenance. Life is not a substance added to matter. Life is matter held in a very difficult pattern for a little while. You know this without equations. You feel it when your body gets cold after exhaustion. You feel it when hunger changes your mood. You feel it when grief makes your limbs heavy, as if meaning itself had weight. You feel it when a room becomes quiet after someone dies, and the silence seems physical, not poetic, because a pattern that once pushed air, warmed fabric, consumed oxygen, made sound, and answered, "Your voice is no longer doing those things. Something has changed." But not everything has vanished. The body does not become nothing. The energy does not drop out of existence. The heat moves into the room. The molecules remain in the system. The carbon returns to cycles older than memory. The phosphorus, calcium, nitrogen, potassium, sodium, iron, water, and trace elements do not receive a command to disappear. They are reassigned. That word sounds too mechanical for something as emotional as death, but physics is often most brutal when it is most precise. Your body is not a sealed container carrying a private amount of energy from birth to death. It is a region where the universe temporarily keeps a pattern running. Every meal, every breath, every heartbeat, every temperature change is an accounting entry in that pattern. You take in energy in one form. You transform it. You lose some as heat. You store some as chemical bonds. You spend some as motion, You use some to maintain gradients across membranes so neurons can fire and muscles can contract. The moment the maintaining stops, the exchange continues. Only the pattern changes. Before you go deeper into that idea, if this kind of science makes you feel your body differently, subscribe and leave a like. Not for motivation, but because the next tiny gesture may change how you understand the most ordinary physics inside you. Now lower your hand. Look at it. The hand seems still, but it is not still. The atoms inside it are vibrating. The water molecules are moving. The proteins are flexing. The membranes are holding electric differences between inside and outside. Your hand is not a block of matter. It is a chemical city running at body temperature. The first hidden fact is that your body is mostly not the same matter it used to be. Water turns over. Cells are replaced at different rates. Proteins are built and broken down. Carbon atoms that were once in air become part of food, then part of blood, then part of tissue, then air again. Even while you feel continuous, your material basis is flowing. Continuity is not sameness of atoms. Continuity is pattern. That difference matters because the question, "Where does my energy go when I die?" usually confuses two things that feel identical from the inside: energy and identity. Energy is measurable capacity for work or heat transfer. Identity is an organized pattern of memory, body, relationship, attention, and biological continuity. Physics conserves energy. Physics does not promise that every pattern remains intact. A candle is a useful but dangerous analogy. When a candle burns, the wax does not vanish. Its molecules react with oxygen. Energy stored in chemical bonds becomes heat and light. Carbon becomes carbon dioxide. Hydrogen becomes water vapor. The flame is real, but it is not a separate substance hiding inside the wax. It is a process sustained by fuel, oxygen, temperature, and geometry. Your life is not a candle. But the mistake is similar. You look at the flame and imagine a thing. Physics looks at the flame and sees a process. The body is more complex than wax by an almost absurd margin. It is not merely burning, it is regulating, sensing, repairing, remembering, moving, predicting, defending, digesting, filtering, sleeping, dreaming, desiring, and deciding. But underneath all of that complexity is a simple physical requirement. Energy has to move in organized ways. The brain alone, though only a small fraction of body mass, uses a large share of resting energy to maintain electrical gradients, recycle neurotransmitters, support synaptic signaling, and keep neurons ready to fire. Your thoughts are not little ghosts floating above matter. They depend on sodium, potassium, calcium, glucose, oxygen, membrane potentials, blood flow, temperature, and timing. A thought feels weightless, but it is paid for physically. That is why death is not just the stopping of one organ. It is the collapse of coordinated energy management. The gradients begin to fail. Cells lose the ability to maintain separation between inside and outside. Oxygen-dependent metabolism stops. Stored energy is consumed without renewal. Enzymes begin working in directions the living body prevented. Bacteria and chemistry continue what consciousness cannot supervise. This is not romantic. It is deeper than romance, because it means your body was never outside the universe. It was never granted a private exemption from entropy, temperature, decay, conservation, or exchange. The same rules that govern stars, storms, oceans, engines, forests, and black holes also pass through your skin right now. Stephen Hawking understood something terrifying and beautiful about this. He studied objects that seemed to be the ultimate end of information, the ultimate prison of energy, the final one-way door. A black hole looked like the universe's perfect grave. Matter falls in, light cannot escape, and from the outside, the object seems to hide whatever crossed the horizon. Then Hawking showed that the story was not so simple. In 1974, in his paper, Black Hole Explosions, Hawking argued that quantum effects near a black hole could make it emit thermal radiation. A black hole was not completely black. It had temperature. It could lose mass. It could exchange energy with the rest of the universe. That idea changed physics because it put gravity, quantum theory, and thermodynamics in the same room and forced them to argue. The point for your body is not that you are a black hole. The point is that boundaries are never trivial. A boundary decides how energy appears, where information can be recovered, and what an outside observer can measure. Your skin is not an event horizon, but it is still a boundary. Your death is not black hole evaporation, but it is still a transformation in a physical system. Your warmth, breath, chemistry, and movement are not isolated possessions. They are exchanges across borders. The common belief is that death is the moment energy disappears. The mechanism rewrites it. Death is the moment the body stops organizing energy as one living pattern, while the energy and matter continue their movement through the larger system. That sentence can feel cold. But cold does not mean empty. It means precise. Think of a whirlpool in a river. You can point to it, you can name it, you can watch it persist for minutes, hours, maybe longer. It has a visible shape. It behaves like a thing. But the water inside it is constantly changing. The whirlpool is not a separate object placed inside the river. It is a pattern the river is making under certain conditions. Change the current, change the rocks below, change the inflow, and the whirlpool ends. The water remains. The pattern does not. Your body is not merely a whirlpool, but the analogy protects you from one of the most common errors in thinking about death, mistaking persistence of ingredients for persistence of arrangement. You already accept this in other places. A song is not destroyed when the last note fades, because the air molecules keep existing. But the song as that exact pattern of pressure waves has ended. A flame does not vanish into nothing. But the flame as that particular process stops when fuel or oxygen is gone. A thought does not leave behind a glowing object after it passes, yet the physical brain that produced it has changed, because the thought occurred. Life is pattern at high cost. Death is not the annihilation of energy. Death is the loss of the cost-paying organization. This is why the subject matters before you die. Because the same confusion that makes death seem like magical disappearance also makes life feel like possession. You say, "My energy," as if energy were a battery locked inside you, but every second your energy is borrowed, transformed, leaked, replaced, and shared. You are warmed by stars. You are built from dead organisms. You breathe air altered by trees, oceans, microbes, cities, fires, and lungs that existed before yours. You eat matter that was soil, leaf, animal, mineral, rain, sunlight, and labor. Your cells do not care about the human story attached to the atoms. They care about gradients, bonds, charges, temperature, and available pathways. This does not make you less human. It makes being human more improbable. Because for decades, matter that did not know your name assembled into someone who could say, "I," remember a face, fear an ending, love a voice, and ask where the energy goes. That question is not childish. It is the universe becoming aware of its own bookkeeping. Now bring your attention to your breath. You inhale. Oxygen crosses into blood. It binds to hemoglobin. It travels to tissues. Inside mitochondria, electrons move through protein complexes in a membrane so small you never feel it directly. Protons are pumped. A gradient forms. ATP is produced. The body uses ATP to contract muscle, transmit nerve signals, build molecules, repair damage, maintain temperature, and keep the border between life and collapse temporarily defended. This is not a metaphor for energy. This is energy, not as glowing light, as organized difference. A charged membrane is energy held as separation. A chemical bond is energy held in molecular structure. A raised arm is energy converted into motion against gravity. A warm body is energy leaking into colder surroundings. A memory is not energy alone, but it depends on energy-consuming changes in living tissue. When you die, the body stops preserving these differences. The separation fades, gradients dissolve, temperature equalizes, molecules enter new reactions. The body becomes more like its environment, not because it becomes meaningless, but because the living system no longer spends energy resisting that equalization. Entropy is not a monster. Entropy is the statistical tendency for concentrated arrangements to spread, for gradients to flatten, for highly specific patterns to become less specific unless energy is continuously used to maintain them. Life is a temporary local resistance to entropy, not a violation, a negotiation. A living body keeps itself far from equilibrium by taking in energy and exporting disorder as heat and waste. That phrase sounds abstract until you realize you are doing it now. Your warmth is the receipt. Your exhale is the receipt. Your need for sleep is the receipt. Your hunger is the receipt. Your fatigue is the receipt. You do not own energy by keeping it. You live by moving it. This is one reason the title is dangerous if misunderstood. Your energy does not disappear when you die. But that does not mean physics has proven that your personal consciousness continues as a preserved, measurable energy cloud. Science can say the energy and matter of the body transform. It can say the living pattern depends on physical organization. It can say no known law allows energy to vanish into nothing. It cannot honestly say that identity, memory, or awareness continue in the same way just because energy is conserved. That distinction is not an attack on mystery. It is respect for it. False comfort makes the universe smaller. Real physics lets it remain vast. And Hawking, more than almost anyone, lived inside that vastness. His body became limited in ways that would make most people assume the mind must shrink with it. Yet he studied the largest questions available: singularities, the origin of the universe, the thermodynamics of black holes, time, entropy, radiation, information. His work did not reduce existence to machinery. It showed that even the most extreme machines in the universe are stranger than common sense. The lesson is not that death is simple. The lesson is that disappearance is almost never the right word in physics. Transformation is. Before the next layer. If you want more scripts where ordinary fear is taken apart by real physics, subscribe and leave a like. This channel is not here to make the universe softer. It is here to make it clearer. Now consider the first 30 seconds after a living system fails. Not as a horror image, as physics. Blood circulation stops delivering oxygen. Cells that require oxygen cannot continue normal aerobic metabolism. Some tissues tolerate this longer than others. The brain is especially vulnerable because it depends intensely on continuous oxygen and glucose delivery. Without that delivery, electrical activity changes, then fails. The organized signals that supported perception, memory, and voluntary control lose their conditions. But heat remains. Chemical energy remains. Molecular motion remains. Atoms remain. The body is no longer maintaining the living pattern, but physics does not create a hole in the universe where a person used to be. The room warms slightly because the body had heat. The air changes because breathing stopped. The tissues change because metabolism, immune regulation, circulation, and cellular maintenance stopped. Microbes continue metabolic work. Enzymes continue chemical work. Gravity continues mechanical work. Temperature continues thermal work. Insects, soil organisms, water, oxygen, and time may eventually participate depending on conditions. The death of a person is an emotional absolute to those who loved them. But physically, it is not an absolute boundary between something and nothing. It is a transition from regulated exchange to unregulated exchange. That is the mechanism. In life, the body chooses pathways, not consciously in every cell, but through evolved regulation. It directs blood. It controls pH. It keeps temperature in range, it repairs membranes, it removes waste, it suppresses some microbes and tolerates others. It turns genes on and off, it folds proteins, it recycles damaged components, it stores energy, it releases energy. In death, many of those choices end. The energy no longer serves the unified pattern. That is why saying, "your energy continues," is true but incomplete. Yes, the energy continues. But no, not necessarily as you. The emotional part of you may resist that sentence because it seems to steal meaning. But meaning was never located only in physical permanence. A spoken sentence ends and still changes a life. A star dies and still builds the elements that become planets. A hand releases yours and still alters the way your nervous system responds to the world for years. A person does not need to remain physically arranged forever to have changed the physical future. That is another kind of conservation, not a strict law like energy conservation, but a real causal fact. Once something has happened, the universe is not the same as it would have been without it. You have already done things that cannot be undone from the history of matter. You moved air. You changed other nervous systems. You warmed rooms. You ate from ecosystems and returned to them. You altered memories inside brains that are not yours. You left traces in behavior, decisions, bodies, habits, fears, courage, language, and attention. Physics conserves energy. Life distributes consequence. The body's atoms are ancient. Hydrogen in you traces back toward the early universe. Carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, calcium, and iron were forged or processed through stellar and cosmic history long before they became blood, bone, skin, breath, or brain. You are not made of new material invented for your biography. You are made of old matter temporarily arranged into a biography. That does not make you generic. It makes the arrangement astonishing. A library and a campfire can contain some of the same atoms, but the arrangement decides whether there is a book or ash. A brain and a stone both obey physics, but the arrangement decides whether there is experience. A living body and a dead body contain many of the same elements at first, but the arrangement decides whether there is a person. So the real question becomes more exact. Not, does energy disappear? It does not. But what kind of arrangement allows energy to become experience? That is harder. And Hawking's universe was filled with questions like that. He asked what happens when gravity becomes so strong that space and time themselves behave differently. He asked what happens to information when matter crosses an event horizon. He asked whether the universe has a beginning in time. He asked whether black holes, once treated as eternal traps, actually have temperature and can evaporate. Again and again, the answer was not simple survival or simple disappearance. It was transformation under rules deeper than intuition. This is where the industrial analogy becomes useful. A power plant does not create energy from nothing. It converts energy from one form into another. Chemical energy to heat, heat to steam pressure, pressure to turbine motion, motion to electrical current, current to work somewhere else. If the plant shuts down, energy has not been murdered. The fuel may remain unused, heat may dissipate, moving parts stop. The grid no longer receives organized output from that station. The system changes from organized conversion to scattered potential and residual heat. Your body is not a power plant. It is more elegant, more adaptive, more fragile. But when it stops, the problem is similar. Not that energy disappears, but that the machinery of coordinated conversion is no longer operating as a unified system. Modern medicine can sometimes restart parts of that system if conditions allow. A heart can be shocked because electrical rhythm matters. Breathing can be supported because oxygen delivery matters. Temperature can be managed because metabolism and injury depend on it. These are not mystical interventions. They are evidence that life is physical organization, and sometimes the organization can be restored if the collapse has not gone too far. But eventually, every living system crosses a threshold where the pattern cannot be recovered. The molecules remain, the heat moves, the elements continue. The person, as a living organized system, is gone. That sentence is difficult because it asks you to hold two truths without letting one cancel the other. Nothing disappears into nothing. And not every pattern survives. This is also why your daily exhaustion can feel like a tiny preview of the same law. When you say, "I have no energy," physics would not agree literally. You still contain energy in chemical bonds, heat, tissue, fat stores, glycogen, moving ions, and pressure systems. What you lack is accessible, organized, usable energy in the right pathways at the right time. You do not feel energy itself. You feel organization. You feel whether your brain can allocate attention. You feel whether muscles can respond. You feel whether hormones, sleep, glucose, inflammation, emotion, and circulation are allowing energy to become useful action. So even in life, energy is not enough. Arrangement matters, timing matters, access matters, pathway matters. A body can contain fuel and still feel drained. A brain can contain electrical activity and still feel lost. A room can contain sound and still lack music. A universe can conserve energy and still allow the loss of forms you loved. The common belief is that energy continuing after death means the self continues unchanged. The mechanism rewrites it. Energy conservation protects the accounting of the universe, not the permanence of every pattern the universe briefly learns to make. That reformulation hurts more, but it is cleaner. And sometimes clean truth gives deeper comfort than decorated confusion. Because if your energy is not private property, then your life was never an isolated possession either. You were always ecological, physical, relational, cosmic. You were always borrowing and returning. You were always a temporary concentration of ancient material and ongoing energy flow. You were always more like weather than marble, more like flame than statue, more like music than metal. The tragedy of music is that it ends. The miracle of music is that it can exist at all. Now place your hand on your chest again. Feel the warmth. This warmth will not stay in you forever. Some of it is leaving now. It is moving into fabric, air, objects, other bodies, walls, water vapor, the world. Every second you are alive, you are already sharing energy. Death does not introduce the sharing. It removes the organizer that made the sharing feel like one person. This is why grief often clings to objects: a shirt, a chair, a room, a cup, a pillow, a voice recording. The mind wants evidence that the pattern touched the world. And it did. Not metaphorically, physically. Skin compressed fabric. Breath changed air. Hands wore surfaces. Heat entered rooms. Sound waves moved eardrums. Choices changed schedules. Words changed nervous systems. The loved person is not reduced to those traces. But those traces are not imaginary. They are causal leftovers of a pattern that once organized energy in a way no one else did. That is why death is not an argument between science and meaning. It is the place where science explains the transformation, and meaning explains why the transformation hurts. Physics can tell you that energy is conserved. It cannot tell you how to love what was temporary. But it can reveal that temporary does not mean unreal. A rainbow is temporary and completely physical. A heartbeat is temporary and completely physical. A thought is temporary and completely physical. A life is temporary and completely physical. Temporary is not the opposite of real. Temporary is one of the ways reality appears. This is the part Hawking's work makes almost unbearable. The universe is not designed around human scale. Black holes evaporate across unimaginable durations. Stars burn for millions or billions of years. Particles obey rules that do not care whether a person is afraid. Space expands. Entropy grows. Time does not negotiate with grief. And yet, within that enormous indifference, matter arranged itself into beings capable of asking whether anything is lost. That question is already a cosmic event, not because it proves immortality, because it proves awareness can emerge from atoms that once belonged to stars. If that sounds too large, return to the hand. The hand is manageable, warmth under skin, breath under ribs, pulse under tissue, small pressures, small movements. This is not the whole mystery. It is the doorway you can feel. For the third and final time, here is a question for the comments. When you hear that energy continues but patterns change, what concrete trace from someone's life feels most real to you? A voice? A habit? An object? A place? Or something else? Now let the hand fall. Do not rush to make this comforting. The body does not owe you a comforting answer. It owes you the truth of its laws, and the laws are stranger than comfort anyway. Your body is not a container of magic energy waiting to escape. It is an open system, and every open system survives by exchanging. You are alive because boundaries are selective, not absolute. Skin holds you together, but it breathes heat. Lungs separate inside from outside, but only by letting outside in. The gut protects you, but also absorbs the world. The brain feels private, but it depends on blood, oxygen, temperature, light, sleep, sound, touch, food, and other people. You are never closed. That is why death can be seen, physically, not as the opening of a sealed box, but as the ending of selective organization. The border loses its governance. The exchange continues without the signature. If you have ever watched fog dissolve under sunlight, you know the shape can end without the water ceasing to exist. If you have watched a wave flatten, you know motion can pass into the sea without being deleted. If you have heard a final note fade, you know vibration can disappear as music, while energy becomes heat too small for your ear to follow. The body is like that, but also not like that, because the body knew hunger, memory, fear, tenderness, language, embarrassment, hope, and pain. Physics does not flatten those things. It asks what conditions allowed them. And the answer is more beautiful than a simple substance. Conditions allowed them. Energy flow allowed them. Matter allowed them. Time allowed them. Relationship allowed them. Evolution allowed them. A narrow range of temperature allowed them. A planet with water allowed them. A star at the right distance allowed them. Chemistry allowed them. Boundary allowed them. You did not appear outside the universe. You were one of the universe's temporary ways of becoming specific. That is why the phrase, "your energy does not disappear," must be handled carefully. It is true, but small. The larger truth is that nothing about you was ever outside transformation. Your body was transformation disciplined into identity. Your thoughts were transformation disciplined into meaning. Your relationships were transformation disciplined into memory. Your life was transformation disciplined into a name. When the discipline ends, the transformation remains. This does not make death easy. It makes disappearance less honest. Maybe that is why Hawking's physics still grips the imagination. He looked into the places where intuition says nothing escapes and found heat, radiation, entropy, information, paradox, and accounting. He did not make the universe gentle. He made it harder to dismiss. Even the darkest object had a temperature. Even the strongest boundary had a question. Even the place called black was not simply empty. Your body is not a black hole. Your death is not Hawking radiation. Your consciousness is not proven to continue by the first law of thermodynamics, but your energy, your matter, your heat, your atoms, your causal traces, your consequences, and the physical changes you made do not collapse into nothing. They move, they spread, they enter other equations. The universe keeps accounts in ways your fear does not always understand. And maybe the most human thing is not to demand that the pattern last forever, but to feel, while it is here, how astonishing it is that the pattern ever formed. A warm hand, a moving chest, a brain asking about death. Atoms speaking about atoms. Energy wondering where energy goes. For a little while, the universe calls that you.